اليوم إن شاء الله محاضرنا الأستاذ الدكتور رافي حبيب، أستاذ الأدب واللغويات بالولايات المتحدة الأمريكية والمتعاون مع كلية اللغات والترجمة. فنتقدم بجزيل الشكر والتقدير لسعادته على تشريفه لنا هذا اليوم. وقبل أن نبدأ المحاضرة يسعدني ويشرفني أن أشكر قسم اللغة الإنجليزية على نشاطه الملموس في الفترة الأخيرة، وهذا الشكر للسادة أعضاء هيئة التدريس وعلى رأسهم الأستاذ الدكتور أحمد السيد رئيس القسم، وصاحب الفكرة هو والدكتور أحمد العزبي اللي بتقدم ليه بجزيل الشكر والتقدير على ما يقدمه دائما من دعم علمي أكاديمي لقسم اللغة الإنجليزية وللدكتور عمرو. وفرصة طيبة.
We have actually been having him for the last 3 months as a visiting scholar who visited us and attended some of my postgraduate students' classes, in participating with his scholarly knowledge about translation studies and about the Quran. A translator of the Quran is someone distinguished because the mission is not that easy, it's not easy at all. And very few people would dare start such a great mission. Professor Habib is with us today to talk about his very distinguished translation of the Quran, which I describe, according to his wish, I describe as both accurate and beautiful, and this is so rare in this field. I'd like to introduce him by giving his bio to the audience. An important essay entitled Hegel and Islam, Philosophy, East and West. Please join us in welcoming Professor Rafi Habib. Please take your time. You don't have to stand unless you wish so. You can sit comfortably because we'd like you to talk a lot. Usually time is specific, but I would like, by the permission of the Dean and the head of the department, to give you an open mic.
أنا أعتذر مساحة من المعمل نظرا إحنا في أعمال امتحانات حالا شغالة في كل سنة وبيتصلوا عليها حالا كتير، فأنا بعتذر جدا يعني، وبنتمنى لكم التوفيق
شكرا على الإجابة. تفضلي.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. وعليكم السلام. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me okay? So I would like to begin, first of all, by thanking Dean Khalid and Professor Ahmed and Professor Elizaby for their very gracious introductions. It's a great honor. I will learn as much from you as anything that you can learn from me. Because what I realized after finishing this translation, I realized, number one, the translation is never quite finished. It's never good enough. And number two, for me, this was like the beginning of a journey. It's not the end of a journey, it's the beginning of a journey. Because when we ended the translation, it took us 10 years. And when we ended this, I realized how ignorant I am and how much more I need to learn. So, we offer our translation in a kind of spirit of humility. The purpose of this translation, the main idea was that it would be a collaboration between me, who am an expert in English, or so-called expert, and an expert in Islamic. ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يأتيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث صدق الله العظيم. Okay, now I'm going to read out our translation. By the morning light in its brilliance, by the darkening night in its stillness, the Lord has not abandoned you, nor is He abhorring you. What comes hereafter will prove finer for you than what came before, and your Lord will provide, satisfying you. Did He not find you orphaned and give shelter, find you seeking and give guidance, find you needing and suffice you? So do not oppress the orphan, nor reproach the one who asks, but proclaim the grace of your Lord. Translation, and I'm just going to explain some of the things that we try to do with this and some of the obstacles. If you don't mind, I'm going to sit down because I can see my own screen a little bit more clearly. So, sorry, can you still hear me? Yes. Okay. So, the very first obstacle is created by the fact that Arabic has these rhymes, these end rhymes in Arabic are very insistent and very powerful, and they are part of the effect. Okay. So what we did, we tried to. The other thing is, in English, you can't actually do that. If you put N rhymes, you put a lot of N rhymes in English at the end of short lines, it's going to sound like a nursery rhyme. It's going to sound like a ballad, right? And this is not appropriate for a divine scripture. And so we use a couple of rhymes, like we have morning light, darkening night. But then we also use internal rhymes, like brilliance and stillness, right? And then we have, like, assonance is when you have a similar sound, similar vowel sound. So you have no pouring you. We have before, and then provide and satisfy. They have the same kind of of this. So Now, the word ahad, okay, it refers to, again, this is not me, this is what the Mufassirin say. The word ahad obviously means unity or one, but it refers to a specific type of unity, right? It refers to the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not composite. So the translation is, I can't see it very well here. God is the light of the heavens and of the earth. His light is a parable of a niche which holds a lamp. The lamp enclosed in a glass which gleams like a gleaming star, lit from an olive tree, blessed, whose soil is neither east nor west. Its very oil would shine forth, though untouched by fire. Light upon light. God guides to his light in the earth. He strikes parables for humankind, for God is knower of all things. Do you want me to just stop there, or do you want me to say something about this? I'll just say quickly that we try to, one of the things we translate this as a kind of verse, I say verse, not poetry, is that the Quran is meant to be recited slowly in rhythmic measure. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs the Prophet in Surah Muhammad, right? وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا.
أشكر قسم اللغة الإنجليزية ولي الشرف إني أكون في الكلية النهاردة. بشكر كلية اللغات والترجمة وجامعة الأزهر. الشكر واجب طبعا للبروفيسور رافي حبيب. I'm here to focus on a community of scholars. We need a methodology. The title of the presentation is Translating the Quran, Challenges and Strategies. I'm focusing on a methodology. I taught at Alsun Quran translation for about 10 years. And one of the most brilliant scholars was from Al-Azhar, Ahmed. And we were developing a methodology. And because we are the faculty of languages, Ayn Shams University, our methodology began with the lexicon, the dictionary. The dictionary meaning المعنى في المعجم. began lexically, المعنى في المعجم. And we began Arabic with the leading lexicons, Arabic English, and English for the usage when we formulate the text. Then we moved on to tafsir. You use the term commentators. Did you mean by commentators al-mufassirun? Al-mufassirun, excellent, tafsir. But tafsir is problematic. Because some of the commentators their comments are marked with exegesis, fixed meaning, and Quran is an open text. You see, one of them is Ibn Kathir, whereas someone like Al-Qurtubi, he's a scholar. But the tafsir of Al-Fatiha can go on for 100 pages. You see? Then we moved on, Quran translation, the leading scholars. One of them is an Oxford graduate, like you, Harvey, a brilliant translator. You see, I'm Victor. And I would like to know who of them do you value most as, first of all, lexicons, number 2, commentators, number 3, Quran translators. In the meantime, when we talk about methodology, we also talk about consistency. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, when I looked at the Amazon text, which is now available on Amazon of your text, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, ترجمها أستاذنا in the name of God, the most merciful, ever merciful. I would like to know why. Right? In the meantime, also when we have the title in our methodology, our very modest methodology, we have class. We write 112, the number of the surah between brackets, then al-ikhlas, then between brackets, sincerity. Sincerity, the meaning in English. Again, 112, al-ikhlas, sincerity. So I would like to know what you did with the titles. That's all, and I wish to congratulate you because your text is marked with what Imam Al-Ghazali mentioned about the beauty and grace of God Almighty. We can see it in the universe in anything which is marked with Al-Jamal, Al-Jalal, excellence, beauty, and grace. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you. Translation Al-Azhar University. My name is Dr. Al-Amin. I lecture in English language and literature, literary theory and criticism. Same domain. First of all, I asked this question for a long time when I thought about who is supposed to interpret the meaning of the Holy Quran. And we have our great scholars in our Islamic philosophy and our Islamic studies say that there's some prerequisites and preconditions for anyone who's supposed to interpret the meaning of the Holy Quran, and he's supposed to have a mastery of about 8 domains of studies. Okay, from these syntax, the semantics, the causes of revelation, which we said it asbab nuzul in Arabic. So, do you have any background reference for your translation? This is my first question. Okay. Number 2, I know that the rhymed form is supposed to be very easy for what we call the al-muhkam, not al-mufassal from al-Quran, or the lengthy chapters or lengthy surahs and the short one. So of course I think that it's more easier to have the short or the muhkam from surahs. So I think you're supposed to have some difficulties in the lengthy chapters or the... Thank you very much. These are my 2 questions. Thank you.
available for audience. Believe there is enough for Professor Rafi Habib. Okay?
Keep it off. So, so I'm going to answer the gentleman's questions first. So, to answer your first question, as I said at the beginning, this project was a collaboration between myself and a very famous Islamic scholar, right? And so he is the expert in those kind of fields, and also his wife is a professor of Arabic. So this was a collaboration between us. But also I will tell you that the collaboration didn't stop there. As we were translating this, we consulted with many scholars in the world, many native speakers of Arabic in various countries. We consulted with English language poets. We consulted with all kinds of people, you know. So again, I know, you know, I've read some of these. I've read some of these kind of what do you call them? Manifestos, which say, well, in order to translate the Quran, you have to be an expert in this, and you know, one of them say you've got to be an expert in English and Arabic. But you know, I've never met anyone in my whole life who is an expert in English and Arabic. You can't live your whole life in an Arabic-speaking culture and your whole life in an English-speaking culture. It's not possible, right? You can achieve a degree of proficiency, fluency, right? But yes, I agree. In these manifestos, it's great if you can do it. But also you have to look, when you look at people who have all those qualifications, also look at the translations they produce, you know. And someone can have all those qualifications and produce a translation that is just flat, you know.
First of all, I showed that this effort should be miraculous at any scale, by the way. So it doesn't mean that this work is not trustworthy or it's not very good or sufficient enough. But what I mean is that such prerequisites asked or put at or stimulated by such scholars for this. But I'm sure that your work is miraculous at any scale, by the way. Doesn't mean that I diminish the work itself. Your name, by the way, is a name that makes me very long to think about, well, what should it be in Arabic? Rafi Habib. Habib is Arabic. And
Abdul Rafi. It's from the Asma al-Husna, yeah.
So for a long time, I wouldn't imagine that I would face-to-face meet Mr. Rafi Habib, by the way. So it's a good honor for all of us.
Well, it's an honor for me. Can you just remind me what your second question was?
Second question is, what did you do with the difference between
Oh, yes, yeah. Okay,
short and lengthy?
right, I want to show you.
In case any of you would like to add a question in the piece of paper and send it to us, please do.
Now,
Be prepared to ask Khalid.
I agree with you, and most people would agree that with the shorter surahs, you know, these are very easy. I won't say they're easy, but they're easier to put into poetic form. It's not, but someone did say to me, well, that's fine, but what are you going to do with Surah Al-Nisa, Surah Al-Ma'idah, you know, and Al-Imran? So, I want to read out to you our translation. This is the longest ayah in the whole Quran. And it's not poetic, the subject matter is not poetic at all. It's from Surah Al-Baqarah.
That verse.
I'm going to read you the translation. Okay. You who believe, because it's a that's not the issue. The issue is, can we translate it poetically? Even passages which are about
more rhythmic,
yeah.
more rhyming, rather than
Yeah. So let me read this out to you. You who believe, when you contract a debt for a fixed term, put it in writing. Let the scribe write it down equitably between you. And let the scribe not refuse to write it. Let him inscribe as God has taught him. So let him write, and let the debtor dictate, and let him be mindful of God, his Lord, and not reduce the debt at all. If the debtor is mentally disabled, or weak, or unable to dictate, then let his guardian dictate equitably and call 2 witnesses from your men. If there are not 2 men, then 1 man and 2 women whom you approve as witnesses. If one forgets, the other can refresh her memory. So we tried, even when it was a long passage, we tried to break it up to make it easy for the reader. And now, Doctor, I want to get to your questions. For the first question, yes, that I would have to leave in the lexicon or everything. I would have to leave to my colleague. Okay. But the second question, I mean, if you ask me for my favorite, I would say Razi, Razi, Kashani. I'm not a big fan of Ibn Kathir, so, I tend to prefer the ones who a little bit less, a little bit more ambitious and more intellectual, yeah. As far as translations go, I quite like Aubrey. The thing with Aubrey, unlike a lot of people, he knew what he was doing, I mean, he had mastery, and I also like Abdul Halim, actually. Abdul Halim. I mean, he uses archaic language, but I think he's got. You see, this is the thing. I have to go to your question as well. Look, I'm not going to mention any names, but sometimes, I've come across a scholar who's a much greater scholar than me, and they don't like it. They don't like someone like it. They try, and they can't do it because they don't have the ear. If you don't have the ear for the language, it doesn't matter how much learning you have. You can't do it, right? And so again, I'm not going to pretend that I'm some kind of great scholar, because I'm not. I'm not even a great scholar in English. But what I do say is that I think translation of the Quran is necessarily a collaborative process where you get information and feedback from all the people who are qualified, all the people who are qualified first, all the people. So of course there are a lot of people who know Arabic better than I do, and so I go to them for advice, and not just casual, but every single verse that we translated, they go to more than one person. How does this sound to you? Is it accurate? Is it this? Is it that? So we try to be as careful as we can. And I'm not saying that we don't make, I'm sure we make mistakes, but I hope that answers your question somewhat here.
Okay. Professor Marwan, please come to the front. talk مع سؤال. هنتكلم بدور دكتور حسن مع الدكتور سعيد. ماشي اتفضل لا تشوف كل الدكتور لا بأس. دكتور رهان اتفضل. البروفيسور رهان فيك كان سبيك. عشان تأكد بقول الناس سمعت.
Assalamu alaikum. I would like actually to thank you for your beautiful, for your great presentation. This work is so great, and I think it is unique simply because I was searching and Googling actually go to efforts, watching some YouTubes and try to read some passages for your translation. The unique thing is that presenting the Quran in verse style, and this is, it is unprecedented, I think, in the field of translation studies, except I think Abdullah Yusuf Ali, who translated the Quran, but his language seems to be archaic. My question is focusing on this particular issue, which is, I'm going to try to write it, which is casting the Quran into English verse risks facing it into a familiar Anglophone literary mode rather than respecting its unique discourse. So how do you justify the choice of clearly poetic form for a text that is neither controversial, conventional prose, nor poetry? When you were actually reviewing the Surah Al-Ikhlas, I found that you tried to make some compromise to the meaning. And I'm sure that if we go deeper into reading some legal theological verses, we will definitely find a lot of those what I can claim to be, compromise with regard to the meaning. Like, for example, the translation of the word as-samad. And you rendered it actually as the absolute. And this is, faithfully, this is not the commonly well-known, unanimously agreed on meaning of the word, because in Arabic the word samad is derived from samada يصمد إليه الناس والخلائق في حاجتهم. And this is not actually the meaning of the word absolute. This is number one, also for translating the word al-ahad, or Allahu ahad. And most of the exegeses of the Quran, they claim that the word ahad and wahid are synonyms. And basically, how can we just, refer it to be the one? The one, is it sufficient actually to convey the meaning? Is it a definition for? This is some of my. So, briefly, to what extent do you see your verse elimination opposes you confront with a lot of challenges in the translation. So my point is, nobody would actually claim to translate the Quran in verse. You did this step. I'm quite sure that there are a lot of compromises with regard to meaning. Meaning is the basic intent of the message of the Quran. So,
Professor Saeed is a professor of Islamic Studies and English at this school, and I'd like you to respond to Muhammad. Thank you, Professor. Okay. Muhammad. Please, whoever sent a written question, please write your name.
Okay. Well, thank you for your question. Again, as I said at the beginning, I don't think just because we want to well, number one, when we say verse, we don't mean any strict form of verse, because the kind of verse that most people use nowadays is so-called free verse. And it allows a lot of flexibility. It doesn't just mean rhyme, right? A lot of it is internal rhyme, a lot of it is using patterns, rhythm. So as far as the word samad is concerned, I don't think this was a case where we compromised. I think it was a case where because look, using the word absolute in that line does not add to the poetic effect. Right? So it was not the case that we thought, oh, this is going to rhyme with something, it's going to sound good. But we actually made a rational choice. We think that the word absolute if you're going to choose any one word in English, with a rational choice, the word absolute is going to convey that meaning more than any other single word. Right? You know, yes.
You have translated it in 7 words. The professor is right. The absolute is one meaning. In the dictionary, الصمد يصمد إليه في قضاء جميع الحوائج والأشياء. هيبقى the omnipotent الذي أزل. The everlasting refuge. The absolute, the omnipotent, the everlasting refuge. There is nothing wrong about having all of these words to be accurate and faithful to a summary. لكن التعريف بتاعي بارد. Anything, the omnipotent, the absolute, the omnipotent الذي أزل. The everlasting refuge يصمد إليه في قضاء جميع الحوائج والأشياء. لأنه الإخلاص رائعة من الروائع. And you have done a wonderful job. Better than any other translator.
Let me ask you.
Add this meaningful stuff.
Let me ask you something, both of you. What about, because, I mean, you know, my purpose is not somehow to prove that I am right. That is not the purpose. My purpose, I think, we are all in service to the Quran. And the purpose here is, if there is something not quite right with our translation, then we need to think about it again. But let me ask you a question. What about if we translated it as something like the absolute refuge? Absolute refuge.
Yes.
Would something like that work?
I agree. If the professor agrees. The absolute refuge.
I think it's not a matter of just giving a very clear, easy answer. It's just a city. Needs confrontation for sure. And this is one of the acceptable, preliminarily acceptable suggestions.
In Dosha, you provided it in 7 words. And they were beautiful.
Let me just answer that. I know I appreciate your comments and the professor's comments, but with sort of the class, if we did the same thing, it's a different kind of surah, and the Quran there is just so concise, the whole thing, that if we put 5 words there in the second line, it's going to destroy that concision. But this is my... Yeah.
Dr. Hassan Khalid, please come in. تفضل. أسأل سؤالك.
شكرا لحضرتك طبعا الدكتور أحمد العزبي وسعادة الدكتور أحمد السيد وأخي العزيز الدكتور عمرو وكل الأكارم اللي أتحفوني بهذه الدعوة الكريمة، وشكر خاص للبروفيسور حبيب. ويلكم. وأنا سعيد إني بستمع إلى هذا اللقاء، وأنا مسؤول عن أمانة الثقافة في مجمع البحوث الإسلامية، ولدينا إدارة مهمة جدا وهي إدارة الترجمة، وزمايلي موجودين النهارده الدكتورة داليا والدكتورة عبير والدكتور سعيد كان على موعد. وصراحة أنا بحيي طبعا الأكابر اللي اختاروا هذه الندوة، وإن كنت أرى كان الأفضل أن تكون مؤتمرا كبيرا. حقيقة يعني. لكن
نحن في انتظار أن نخرج فضيلة الإمام عن ترجمتنا للقرآن، وستعقد إن شاء الله مؤتمرات عنها إن شاء الله. لكن يعني نحن نجد أنه ليس من الأدب أن نتحدث عن ترجمة لم ترى النور بعد.
نعم.
مع أنها قدمت هدية لمعالي رئيس الجمهورية من 2 سنين، ولكن هناك مشكلة في الطباعة يعني نحن في حين أن نتحدث عنها الآن، وربما تظهر ترجمة إن شاء الله سنتحدث عنها كثيرا ونعقد لها مؤتمرات، ورب يكون البروفيسور رافي موجود ويكون معنا إن شاء الله.
حتى أنا سعيد فعلا بطروحاته، لكن بتساءل برضه زي ما سعادة الدكتورة ومعالي الدكتور ليه حضراتكم قلتوا ترجمة القرآن الكريم واحنا المفروض هنتحدث عن ترجمة معاني؟ لأن محدش يقدر يعني قد يكون طرح هذا في مقدمته، لكن يعني أنا لم أستوعبه. طب ليه اقترح ترجم معاني القرآن؟ لأن هذا الكتاب أحكمت آياته محكمه لطيف الخبير. اعجبني جدا استعراضه بسوره الضحى وهي اخذت من جمالها ما اخذت، وتلاوته الجيده جدا بالقران الكريم. وهل استطاعت الترجمه البسيطه دي بعيدا بقى عن المحكم والمتشابه اللي بيتكلم عنه استاذنا، وعن الاسماء والصفات، الله الواحد ولا واحد زي ما الدكتوره قالت، ولا الصمد ومن له السؤدد في الرفعه وغيره، هل الترجمه هتستطيع مثلا في سوره الضحى؟ انا لمحت بعض الترجمات وصورتها طبعا. الضحى اللي هي بتصور باستعاره تصريحيه رائعه نور الوحي للضحى، ولا المقابله اللي بين سجى والضحى وبين الاخره والاولى، ولا الالتفات الجميل اللي هو فاما اليتيم فلا تقهر؟ هل تستطيع الترجمه ان تنقل هذا؟
Professor, allow me to respond to this in Arabic. I will. I'm not trying to defend Professor Rafi because his translation is so beautiful and it can defend itself. But I'm talking from my point of view, my standpoint as a translator of the Quran. Honestly, before I started this project in 2018, until now, I wrote 4 postdoctoral research papers about translating. And now I changed my mind a lot. Many of the ideas I suggested in these research articles, now I changed. For example, the lexical approach to translating the Quran was one of my papers. I said exactly in that piece of research that translators should never rely on exegetes, on any commentary. Otherwise, this is going to be ideology. This is going to be bias and so on. Now, after going through the experience, we must resort to translate, to exegetes, because sometimes we don't understand what's meant. We have to ask them, what do you understand from this not only language, dictionary, wording type? A lexical approach to translation is never enough. And therefore, we, by the way, in our project, I'm resisting. We have a consulting committee, which is perhaps unique in this field, consulting committee, professors of Arabic literature, professors of the tafsir, professors of hadith. We met once a month with 4 committees. We were translating the Quran into 4 languages, Swahili, Hebrew, French, and English. And we met them and we talked to them and asked them, what can I do about this problem of understanding this verse? What can I do about this meaning? What can I say about Sawa ala Arsh? So on and so forth. Endless. Sometimes we had to refer to Imam Abba, the Grand Imam himself, and say, what can we do about this? And he would tell us, and he would give us time. And once we spent 3 hours non-stop with him, with Grand Imam, talking about this project and telling us what to do about the problem. So I think translation the Quran, perhaps Professor Rafi will agree with me, has to be a teamwork. It cannot be done by one person. No one, as he mentioned, no one can be an expert in most languages and live the cultural surroundings of one language. All is not. You cannot divide yourself into people. Therefore, we need a number of people to take part in such a great work. That's one point. The other point is that no one can encompass all the nuances and the complexities, so to speak, in the positive sense of the Quran. No one can claim it. No one. It's human work is perfect. A translation is a human product. The Quran is not. It's a divine work. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can translate it into another language. So we're doing our best. So please accept our pitfalls, our mistakes, our weaknesses. Al-Azhar has not already translated the Quran for the long history of more than 1,000 years. You know why? Why not? It's because the scholars of Al-Azhar used to say that it was not a good work to do. It was haram. For reasons we don't want to talk about now, maybe you can think of them. But recently, Grand Imam Sheikh Ahmed Alsayid, he said that we need it. Go ahead. He studied in France and he understands that if you are French and you don't have access to the Quran in your own language, it's ridiculous to ask people to learn, all people in the world, to learn Arabic in order to study the Quran. That's not possible. But you can give them some substitute. Humble though it may. Okay, that's the point. So when we talk about the absolute or whatever, this is a human effort. And every approach to translating the Quran, it should be done at the expense of something else. If you want to make it beautiful, so beautiful, done, it has to be at the expense of something else. But I witnessed that it's still incest. And I know what I'm talking about. I come from the kitchen itself of cooking this translation. I witnessed that his translation is accurate enough. So please forgive us, forgive our human imperfection, and accept it as it is. And let me give another example. Sorry about talking too much. Yusuf Ali's version of translating the Quran was so elaborate. It was 2 volumes, each more than 1,000 pages. Imagine. Sorry?
I wish to disagree. Yusuf Ali is prejudiced and he depended on the tafsir.
That's not the point now. We can talk about this. My point.
He said the Christians and the Jews.
Yes, I agree with you.
A sweeping generalization.
But my point now is that though this can be very useful to people who are thirsty about knowing much about the Quran, this is at the expense of precision. It's not for common readers. It's so difficult. That's why this voluminous translation was later on abridged into a small this side. Why? Something is at the expense of the other. In our approach, we were given instruction from Mashaykh al-Azhar to be very brief and not to comment much. And I can say, by the way, that Professor Rafi's translation does not have notes. Not at all? Very few. Which is a good approach if you want to be reader friendly as we described before.
احنا نسيبها بس عشان بناتنا واولادنا اللي موجودين. استاذنا ذكرني الان ب 30 سنه مضت وانا اجلس في جامعه الازهر واستمع لاستاذنا وهو بيدرسني في سنه اولى جامعه. لان زمن بيعيد نفسه لانه مسك يقرا المصحف استاذنا في سنه اولى وقال القران ده هو التحدي الاكبر لكم في المستقبل. وما يدري ان الزمان سيدور وطويله يجلس امامه ويرفع صوته. فانا اسف طبعا بس انا الواقع المسؤوليه والتعاون مع الترجمه فده اللي خلانا يعني
انت تقوم بمهمه عظيمه على صدر مهم من صغور الاسلام.
ولا بكرر الشكر جدا للبروفيسور على الجهد الكبير اللي هو ولا يقلل ابدا من الجهد الكبير اللي هو
طبعا. احنا بس بنحاول نفهم الباحثين لانه الباحثين اللي بيكتبوا في ترجمات القرآن أنا لاحظت يعني من إشرافي على رسائل الدكتور أحمد بيتفق معايا إنه الباحث كل شغلته عشان يعمل رسالة ماجستير أو دكتوراه يجيب نص ويفايند فولت فايندينج يشوف إيه الأخطاء اللي وقع فيها المترجم. That's not an objective approach. ده مش طريقة. لأن إحنا بنشوف إيه المفيد وإيه اللي ممكن يضاف. خيركم من أهدى إلي عيوبي. احنا بنحس ان حد انتقدنا عظيمه. اظن ان ده الطريقه المناسبه للابحاث العلميه. نشوف ندرس الميثودولوجي والابروتش زي النهارده طلبت من البروفيسور رافي انه يركز على يبدا بانه يقول لنا منهجه ايه؟ احنا قبل ما نبدا شغلنا في ترجمه القران حطينا منهج احنا هنعمل كذا، احنا هنبقى precise to the point، احنا هنبقى communicative مش literal، لان literal translation احنا لجأنا ودرسنا ترجمات كانت امينه وحسن نيه ونعرف اسماء معينه مش عارف اقولها لان سياق سلبي دلوقتي غايه في الاخلاص، ولكن غايه في الكركبه، يعني القارئ يقرا مش عارف، يعني هو idiomatic when you read a translation and it's too literal. One translator translated فلما سقط في ايديهم ورأوا انهم قد ضلوا when it was made to fall in their hands. What does an English speaker understand from this? Nothing. عشان بيترجموا حرفيا سقط في ايديهم، احنا بنلعب بكرة سلة ولا ايه؟ الكلام لا ينفع، لكن بيقول when they were perplexed, when they were at loss, don't know what to do. Yes, communicative translation. أنا خرجت عن كلام ربنا. أنا فهمت. ما هو ولذلك أنا آسف هنتقل بنقطة why the meaning of the Quran, why the Quran and the meaning of the Quran. I was in the view to say Al-Azhar translation of the Noble Quran, but they insisted, including the Grand Imam, that we had the word the meaning, مترجمة معاني. And my opinion, which I think is online with Professor Rafi, is that when we say we translate, we necessarily mean the meaning. What do we translate if we don't translate the meaning? So I thought it was redundant. I'm not against it. أنا مش ضد ترجمة معاني القرآن، ولكن لما قلت ترجمة معاني القرآن يعني بقول معاني القرآن. It's the same. When I say ترجمة القرآن أقصد نعم ترجمة معاني القرآن بالضرورة. وأعتقد إن نقول معاني القرآن لما بكرر فكرة مفهومة ضمن. بس that's why Professor Rafi ما استخدمش كلمة meaning. وأنا معاه في هذا. برضه قضية ثانية قضية الله ولا God. I was in the point of using God, just like Professor Rafi before I met him, by the way. بعدين الإمام أصدر تعليمات الله. خلاص؟ ده رأي مؤسسي كده يا مولانا احنا كده بنحسس القارئ الغربي اللي هيقرا اللي احنا موجهينه النص ان ده حاجه تاني من الخزعه من ربهم غير الههم. قال لي احتفظ برايك انا اوافق بامانه اهو احتفظ برايك بنفسك انت تعبر عن المؤسسه. لما طالع ترجمه احمد العزبي بكتب لي تعرف قلت له سمعنا واطعنا والله. قال لي ولا سمعنا وعصينا. قلت له عفوا سمعنا واطعنا. اوكي
معلش الله dictionary meaning. Allah the God of Muslims. Dictionary meaning.
This is wrong.
God the God of Muslims, Christians and the Jews.
هل تعلم له سمية؟
لا أعلم. ليس له سمية.
I agree with you. God absolutely.
البروفيسور نزلت الإله عندئذ إذا سألنا بأن الله God's what? Small G?
إله تبقى God's
أنا متأكد إن إحنا لو
mythology.
لكن عشان وقت اتفضل.
I have a question for you, Mr. Rafi, and I have a question is you as a Muslim. In what language do you read the Quran? Like the actual reading of the Quran? Do you read in Arabic or in English? So, مثلا سؤال للدكتور رافي. مثلا سؤال للدكتور رافي بقول له إن هو بقى كمسلم يعني هو بيقرأ القرآن بلغة كعبودة بيقرأ بالإنجليزي اللي هو مثلا كاتبه ولا بالعربي؟ ده سؤال عشان بس الدكتور رافي. والتعليق comment. I think we need to be humble when we think about translating the Quran. We are us. I mean we are Muslims. احنا عرب مسلمين. احنا يعني بنتكلم باسلوب يعني فوقي جدا لما بنتكلم مع حد بيترجم القرآن وتعلم عنه بنتكلم معاه بمنظور الحق المنطق اللي احنا عارفينه. والحقيقه ان it's a problem. Like we think we know the proof, we know the real meaning of the Quran. بس مثلا يعني مثلا النهارده حصل نقاش على كلمه الصمد. صح من معاني الصمد الذي اسمه بلاد الحوائج. من معاني الصمد معاني كثيره. بس لو شفنا برضه الدكتور رافي كتبه في ابسولوت يعني المطلق هم برضه من معانيه الانجليش يعني not relative to anything، يعني ليس له تعلق او نسبيه مع اي شيء. ومن معاني تفسير الكلمه دي عند الامام الرازي اللي هو ايوه الصمد ليس له نسبيه، يعني ليس له شبيه، ليس له ولد. It's a point. فحتى the choice of Dr. Rafi, if we think of تفسير, he has a foundation, a strong foundation. في اساس قوي، مش بس ان احنا عارفين ان هو معنى 1 2 3. كلمه صمد في القران وصلنا في القران يعني يقول لنا ممكن نطلع مثلا عن كلمه الصمد مجلد، صح؟ مجلد. فلما نلاقي مثلا المترجم he took one point or one meaning and did his translation, his تفسير، it's تفسير. we need to be humble. يعني دايما لما بنتكلم عن ترجمات احنا كمسلمين كعرب كازهريين what is this? It's wrong. No, it's not wrong. It's a hard work. It has a foundation على فكرة يعني. فدي الفكرة الأولى and I will appreciate if you tell us as a Muslim what's your ritual reading of the Quran.
Thank you for your comment. First of all, so like most Muslims in the world, since childhood, I read the Quran in Arabic. The problem is, most Muslims in the world, this is a real problem in the world. Most Muslims in the world, even when they're adults, they read the Quran in Arabic, but they don't know what it means. And as a result, most Muslims in the world do not know what is in the Quran. Right? They encourage their kids, in my culture, they encourage their kids to learn the Quran, or learn Surah Yasin or by heart, or whatever, And I'm not saying that's a commendable thing. But they don't know a single word of what it means. And I've even spoken to imams, and I said, how long did it take you to learn the Quran to become a hafiz? They said 3 years. I said, does it help if you understand the meaning? He said, no, it's easier if you don't understand. And so there's a problem right now. It's only later on. I'm glad you asked this question, Doctor. But it's only later on that I started learning the meanings of it. And many Muslims to this day don't know the meanings of their own prayers. And so one of the main, we wonder why the Ummah is in such a bad state. Because we don't know what's in the Quran. Why do we rely on all these imams and, why not just read the book itself, the book of Allah, so we know what's in it.
البروفيسور ذكرني بسيدنا المطعم بن عدي. هو لم يدرك الاسلام لكن هو كان في زمن النبي عليه الصلاه والسلام. كان من اجود العرب واكثر الناس اطعاما للحجيج. لذلك لما الصحابه غاروا منه يعني عايزين يعملوا زيه وبتاع مش قادرين لانه هو كان بينفق بذخ كبير جدا. فكان الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم اذا اشتد الحر حول الكعبه قال لهم هيا نتقي الشمس بإناء المطعم بن عدي. شوف يعني كانوا يروحوا يقعدوا في ظل الإناء بتاع المطعم بن عدي عشان يشيل منهم شويه ان هم مش عارفين يعملوا زيه. فتفسير بحر واسع اظنه كقصعه المطعم بن عدي يعني كلنا هنستظل بها ومش هننتهي. واسمح لي استاذنا يعني مكتوب في الشغل نعتذر لحضرتك. سعيد جدا. شكرا. السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم. وعليكم السلام.
I just have two comments, okay? The first one is concerning the translation of Ebrahem Ahmed, which Professor Ahmed mentioned at the beginning of their comment on the translation of Professor Rafi Habib, okay? This comment I hear it from my, I know, this is what I'm going to comment on again, okay? This is what I actually hear from my late Professor Dali, Rahimahullah. Okay, once in a meeting with Professor Dali, we said that we have to translate the Quran, we have to be very meticulous when we translate the glorious Quran. For example, the word mercy, they said have different translations of this basmala, okay? But he translated himself that way, okay? In the name of Allah, the all merciful, the ever merciful. And when we asked him why did he use, okay, two derivatives of the same adjective, he said that both adjectives in Arabic are derived from the same root, which is mercy, okay? But the difference between them is that difference of the degree of mercy itself, okay? And as for Rahman, it is an adjective or attribute that can be used to modify anyone, okay? Can be used to modify human beings, and non-human beings can be used to modify even our Lord, okay? But the word Ar-Rahman can never be used to modify, okay, just like Allah, okay? So he preferred to translate it that way. Okay, my second comment is concerning Dr. Habib's translation of the Quran into verse. Okay, it is not a translation into verse in the real sense of the word, okay? Because in English verse we have specific, okay, signs of prosody. We have different types and specific number and kinds of poems, okay, and sonnets, okay, that we have to stick to, and each one of them has its own rules, okay, that we have to abide by, okay? But he tried hard to render some of the stylistic and formal features of the Quranic text, okay? And also, I'd like to thank him for producing such a great translation, okay? And we shouldn't, we should try to be merciful, okay, with translators of the Quran, because the translator, any translator of the Quran is a human being, okay, and he is trying to render or transfer the word of God into his own faculty, into his own way, okay? What I'd like to say is that there is no similarity between the types of language produced, okay? The word of God is the miraculous language, okay? The language of the Quran is the ever miraculous language of the Arabic language, okay? But there is no translator who can transfer it or render it into a 100% perfect translation in English, because we have some features and characteristics of Arabic that can never be transferred into English, even if those who translate it are the most well-known scholars of the two languages. Okay, thank you.
Any more comments? Yes. Would you like to come here to the front, please?
Thank you, Professor Ahmed. Thank you, Professor Ahmed Elizaby. Thank you, Doctor, for what your translation is a great effort, and it is also a gift from God to work on the Quran Kareem in any way. Ulum al-Quran, and I consider translation of the Quran Kareem is one of the Ulum al-Quran that must be classified as one of the Ulum al-Quran. Until now, translation of the Quran is not classified as one of the Ulum al-Quran. And I thank also Professor Ahmed Alsayid. She was my professor in Faculty of Alsun some years ago. Actually, I finished my PhD on the translation of the Quran Kareem last year. I saw all the problems you were talking about. So I found the problem is not a word translation or here or the way. No, I found the problems in that tanzim, theorization. There is no fixed or there is no conceptual theory, tanzim, theory, not a theory. The way of considering the Quran Kareem as a unique. I also remember that the last word by Naomi Chomsky, a way of his name is mentioned in episteme files, but actually he said, my biggest problem that I didn't learn Arabic. So to say this is actually has is beyond all what we are talking about now. Now Professor Ahmed speaks about he's from the kitchen. I'm from in the kitchen, I'm from out kitchen. And actually, I am a volunteer in delivering the message of Islam to non-Muslims abroad. I faced the problem of delivering the message of Quran in a very specific and in 10 minutes. Before I give the translation to the tourist, I just say to him 10 minutes of how to read the Quran. I just teach him in 10 minutes about Islam, about everything, about what is the meaning of someone and the names of God. So the problem is that the Islam we must have Islamic the translation of the Quran, and based on this we can go ahead for the translation. And also, this is a copy of my PhD. I hope also to be delivered to Sheikh Ahmed Alsayid. I prepared it for him as a gift, and I got. الترجمان الفقيه. الترجمان في القرآن must be فقيه. So if you can read it, and if you like it, Professor Ahmed, and finally, and if you approve it, yes, it's an effort, and a small effort from my side. Okay, thank you.
Mainly, of course, as I mentioned earlier, to approach translating the Quran, you have to have a methodology in mind. You can't do without it. And we rely basically on modern listening translation theories. For example, semantic versus cumulative. It's the main issue. Are you going to be literal? And if being literal distorts the meaning, then you can't do it. You have to be functional. And then resort to cumulative translation. Will you domesticate God as Allah, or you foreignize the spirit as Allah, or whatever? This is all within the framework of translation theory. But to claim that we have a theory for translating the Quran, that's great. I'm enthusiastic about looking at this and seeing what we have there. And I think it would be a good idea that we go to the Quran man and give him another copy for him. Or shall we go to this and give it back to you? Thank you very much. Okay. So, I have a few questions. If no one would like to come and ask, I have two written questions. Please come. Here, Maria?
Okay, I'd like to talk to you about push the button.
Try this one. Try this one.
1, 2, 3, please. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Eugenia Maria. I am a new Muslim, and that's why I wanted to talk, not just to you here in the physical table, but also to the audience itself. Because I'm a Muslim since a year ago, and you don't have an idea of how much we new Muslims need this. I wish this word could be in Spanish, to be honest. I am from Latin America, and the first approach we have the Quran is in our own native language, or English for us in Latin America, for example, because English is our second language, we could say. So earlier when they were speaking about being humble, all these type of words, that you are doing an effort and all the team behind this project, I would like to say that we truly need this, especially in the Western world. Because, for example, where I live, there are just two mosques. That's it. And I'm just the first Muslim in the family. So when fasting in Ramadan, I'm just the only one who is awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, preparing food. Everyone else is sleeping because they are all Christians, right? So, as I said, for example, you all have the resources and all Islamic studies and Arabic scholars here. We don't. We don't. So you don't have you don't have an idea of the impact this work has. And for example, I have a translation of Quran in Spanish, and when I read it every day or every weekend, I feel like reading the content. I'm feeling home because it is in my native language, right? So I would like you to be more aware and put yourselves in the side of the final customer of all this. And here in this space, I feel like the final customer of all this. You have been working with the team and by yourself. And I would try also to talk to new Muslims, for example, to understand, okay, do you understand the content behind this? Like to put ourselves in the side of the customer experience and the final expectations and what these people you are designing and creating all this work truly need, right? So that's my humble opinion and what I wanted to express. So I feel so lucky to live in a Muslim country, and also thank you so much and keep moving forward with all this wonderful work you all are doing. Thank you so much.
Okay, I have a few questions, written questions here. Let me read them for Professor Rafi. How did you deal with the synonyms in the Quran, such as Rahma, Ra'fa, Maghfirah, or you definitely have faced the challenge of words which appear to be synonyms in the Quran when they are not exactly that. Do you remember how you dealt with it? Like Rahma or Ra'fa? The question is about the challenge of having in the Quran words which may seem to the reader, even the native speaker of Arabic, as synonyms. For example, shak or right. But sometimes the Quran says, إنهم لفي شك مما وإن لفي شك مما تدعون إليه مريب. شك مريب. You cannot modify something with the same synonym. It has to be a bit different in meaning. And that was a theory by Professor Khalid, translator of the Quran, who produced a book of the translation of the Quran called Synonymy in the Quran. So what do you think about synonym? Did you face a problem with synonym? وجعلنا في قلوبهم رأفة ورحمة ورهبانية ابتدعوها ما كتبناها عليهم إلا ابتغاء رضوان الله كما روى حتى يلاقي رقم الآية في سورة الحديد. رقم الآية
26 سورة الحديد.
سورة إيه؟
الحديد الآية 26.
120 26 سورة الحديد. So we see رأفة ورحمة. How you translate the رأفة ورحمة? سورة الحديد. سورة 27. For example, Professor, I remember Shak or Rai, Professor Rai said that Shak is doubt and Rai is suspicion. He said it's almost an accusation. Is that Shakit, you are in doubt but you are not sure. But if you suspect, then you are almost accusing. You tend to believe that something wrong happened. So, linguistics is not absolute synonym.
I don't think it's a big theory to see do you have synonyms in the Quran.
Exactly. In linguistics, yes, this theory has been discussed whether there is synonym or not in language. Sometimes some linguists claim, I think that is David Bristol, claim that there is no such thing as synonym because we have elevator in American English and lift in British English only because they are spoken in two different reasons and there can be synonyms. We want to know in particular what Professor Rafi has dealt with the problem of synonyms, or whether he doesn't think that there is any synonym. What do you think? Okay. Okay.
So we translated it as we place compassion and mercy in the hearts of his followers. Compassion and mercy, yeah.
So different word. Not only different shades of meaning, different, completely different words. Rahma, Rahma. Yeah. I'll mention another example.
الريب والشك.
الريب والشك.
الريب والشك دي اللي صعب.
ريب والشك, right? How did we translate?
الآية كلها.
وإن لفي شك مما تدعون إليه مريب. Can you refer? وإن لفي شك مما تدعون إليه مريب. What was Surah 2?
سورة إبراهيم.
إبراهيم 9.
آية 9.
Surah 14, verse number 9.
While defines his reference, I'd like to say something about mawadda wa rahma. ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا وجعل بينكم مودة. They are not the same. Exegetes say that mawadda at the time of love. When you love your wife, you treat her with mawadda, يعني the extreme kindness you can ever offer. And rahma at the time of conflict, you are being merciful to someone who you dislike, who you don't want to live with, but you still be fair to him or to her. رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال في سياق الزواج يبين هذا المعنى إن جاءكم من ترضون دينه فزوجوه إن أحبها أكرمها مودة وإن كرهها لم يظلمها.
وإنا لفي شك مما تدعوننا إليه مريب. آخر الآية 9
سورة إبراهيم.
مودة ورحمة tenderness and compassion.
Compassion.
Tenderness and compassion.
بالظبط. You are tender to someone you love. You are compassionate to someone even though you don't love them. But you still stay fair. مصداقا لقوله تعالى ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم يعني كراهيتهم على ألا تعدلوا. Be fair in all cases.
مش كل الآية 9 الجزء الأخير ده يا فندم. مش كلها كلها. آخر كده. القلب والفؤاد. القلب والفؤاد في سورة القصص.
القلب والفؤاد.
أصل الصوت كمان في المصعب والله
لا نعم في واحد
القلب والفؤاد الاثنين في بينهم فرق في اللغه العربيه انما في اللغه الانجليزيه طبعا بس المقصود طبعا
احنا دكتوره بنعوض عن المعنى باضافه الصفه.
ايوه
للكلمه
يعني هنا القلب هياخد شكل لوجيك شويه زي بالظبط قام على قلوب اقفالهم فالقلب هياخد لوجيك ناحيه كبير عن الفؤاد اللي هو ايموشنال.
مش لازم تاخد كلمه الكلمه قصادها كلمه. احيانا الكلمه مالهاش فبنحتاج نشرح توصفها. transliteration not resulted في حالة انعدام المكافئ في اللغة الإنجليزية. في حد اقترح دكتور أمال كلمة الرحمن تبقى transliterator. زميل في الجامعة الأمريكية قال لي there is no equivalent to Rahman in English. Rahman يعني إيه؟ The one who shows mercy to those who believe in him and those who do not believe in him. And this is a special meaning you cannot find, probably find.
فدي الاشكاليه. فهو ابتدى الاول برحيم كانها كده بدايه الغيث.
الرحمن الرحمن هو زي كده مترجمه all mercy الرحمن.
كده هو قال ever mercy.
You asked this question, so we translated it as the all merciful, ever merciful, because there are instances, right? But Rahman is like universal, essential, absolute, and Rahim is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to particular people, but it's also ongoing, right? And so that's why we put ever merciful. Yes, Rahman only applies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
One last question I'd like to give you.
شكل مريب ده شكل مريب.
Have to close. Without suspicion.
بس عشان يرد على سؤال شكل مريب.
Suspicious doubt, accusing doubt, not just doubt.
Okay, we don't believe in the message sent with you, and we have grave doubts about what you're calling us to do.
Actually, in our project, we are not enthusiastic to use transliteration. Transliteration means using the same word as in Arabic, but in Roman script, as like the word zakat, for example, because we do not expect the target reader to be familiar with this. So what do they do with a word like the Muslim Ummah? I see many people like to say Muslim Ummah. Yeah, Ummah doesn't have an equivalent in English. Why not Muslim nation? We do that in a very limited scope for this reason. But I'd like to ask Professor Rafi, how to close with this question, about the difference you sense as a native speaker of English, about the difference between ambiguity and polysemy. Both words were used in translating the word تشابه في الآية 7 من سورة آل عمران. والذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات متشابهات. يعني sometimes translated as conflicting, as ambiguous. But my sense is that ambiguous carries negative connotations. And that's why we tended to use polysemy, which means several possible meanings. And I'd like you to ask you what you think of this.
Yeah, so I think you're right, Professor, because ambiguity is a situation where a word can have two meanings. Right? Two meanings, yeah. So if it's ambiguous, it could mean, this could have a good connotation or a bad connotation. But polysemy, as you said, it refers to several levels of meaning. Right? Yeah. Whereas ambiguity, I think, we're more or less restricted to two. Sometimes people misuse the word and they say, oh, this is ambiguous, when what they really mean is this is vague. If something is vague, I mean, it's not clear, right? But if it's ambiguous, it could have two clear meanings, right? But it will have two.
Perhaps the negative connotation comes from the word I keep in mind as a word in Arabic was multabis. Multabis means unclear. Yeah. But polysmos يعني متعدد المعاني يعني.
هو أعظم مثال في القرآن إن أنا أخشى الله من عبادي العلماء.
نعم.
في ambiguous لا في الأول الجزئية أنت العكس وربنا هو اللي بيكشف الموضوع.
Do you remember, yes, Doctor, when last discussion?
We have to come to a conclusion before sunset, and we hope to go back home while still daylight. Thank you very much for your enthusiasm, for your attendance, for taking the trouble of coming here, and for your attention. Thanks very much. Also, we'd like to thank Professor Rafi for his being with us today and for all the informative and heartfelt presentation he has given us this morning. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your questions. Jazakallah.